Hey scientists, it's Jessica Power, one of the science curriculum coordinators at Kansas City Public Schools. Scientists, I have an interesting topic for you today. The topic is adaptations. Adaptations. Adaptations are different either structures or behaviors that plants and animals have that allow them to survive within their environment. Now that seems kind of simple, right? Like, okay, an animal has really long claws, and those claws allow them to dig in the dirt and allow them to have defensive mechanisms to protect themselves from other animals. But scientists, adaptations are way more interesting than that. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to go way back in time. I'm going to go back to 1836. That's right. It's currently 2020, and I want to take us all the way back to 1836. So bear with me. Here we go. In 1836, there was a scientist by the name of Charles Darwin. And Charles Darwin set off on a voyage for 5 years. Scientists, he was on a boat traveling the world for 5 years. Now, during his 5 years of travel, he went from island to island, country to country, and made observations about the different types of animals that lived in those environments. So he explored animals in tropical climates, he explored animals in temperate climates, and he became very interested in birds. Now, not like the idea that birds fly or the colors of birds. He specifically was really interested in bird beaks. As he stopped in the Caribbean, in an area near the Galapagos Islands, he started to notice that there's all different kinds of birds. And all those different birds have different sizes, lengths, and types of beaks. And he began to ask himself, like all good scientists do, why are their beaks all different? And how does the difference in their beaks allow them to survive? Well, scientists, that is what we're focused on. The idea that different birds have different beaks is adaptations. Now, if you've seen a hummingbird has a really, really long nose or beak. And what happens is that hummingbird sticks that beak into a flower or into a hummingbird feeder to get nectar. And so it uses its beak as more of a straw. Whereas some birds, like a big, pelican, or a bird that typically has to dive into the water to get food, they typically have really large beaks. So scientists, I have a little activity for us today, and that activity is going to represent or show us how different kinds of beaks allow birds to eat different foods. Now, as we know, living organisms need food to survive. And we know that plants, they get their energy from the sun, and that allows them to make their own food, right? They're producers. We talked about that a while ago. But scientists, part of being able to survive in the wild as an animal is being able to locate, find, and eat food. Now, a really long time ago, one of our very first meetings together, I talked about penguins. And I talked to you about how penguins have these spiky structures on their tongue that allow them to be able to hold on to prey or shrimp or krill that they're eating. Because the penguins are getting their food out of the ocean, which has lots of water. And so sometimes those shrimp and krill are really slippery. So those little spikes that penguins have on their tongues, those are adaptations. Those are structures the penguin has that allow it to be able to get food and be able to eat that food so it can survive in its environment. Now, unfortunately, penguins are at the top of the food chain, so not all the penguins survive. But here we go. Let's talk about the tools that I have today. The tools that I have are just simple household things. So you could do this type of activity or experiment at home on your own and redo it. First things first, I have some tongs. And these tongs, they're just kitchen tongs, but what they represent are birds with large beaks that are able to scoop and hold, okay? So large tongs. Scientists, I also have a spoon. Okay. I have a pair of tweezers. You can pinch them together. And then finally, I have a toothpick. Yes, the toothpick does represent a beak of a bird. Now, I have a bowl, and this bowl is going to represent the stomach. So we're actually going to do this activity 4 different times, each time with a different tool, either the tongs, the tweezers, the spoon, or the toothpick. And now on this plate, scientists, I have a bunch of different foods, not cooked. In this plate, I have popcorn, I have dried beans, I have rice, and I also have some candy, some Mike and Ike's. Now, what's going to happen, scientists, is I'm going to use the different tools that represent the bird beaks, different sizes, different shapes, and I'm going to simply try to get as much food as possible in one bite. So, let's start with the tongs. All right, scientists, so I'm reaching in, grabbing. Now, I have quite a bit of stuff in here. And I want to focus on what kinds of things I have in here. I have popcorn, I have rice, I have beans, and I have the Mike and Ike's, the candies. So with my tongs, or with this bird beak, I was able to pick up all the different types of food that was available to me. Now you'll notice I also was able to pick up, get all the rice out, quite a bit of food as well. So let's dump it back into our plate. I'll get the remaining rice and popcorn that fell out on accident, put that back on the plate. And let's try again. This time, remember we're just taking one bite. I'm gonna use the spoon. So I've got my spoon. And I'm gonna dump it in the bowl. Remember, our bowl represents the stomach. Scientists, in my bowl, I have popcorn, rice, beans, and Mike and Ike's. So with my spoon, I was still able to get all the food possible. But scientists, do you notice a difference between the amount of food that I picked up this time with the spoon compared to last time with the tongs? Yeah, there's way less food here. So in my one bite, the tongs were able to get more food than the spoon. Now let's move on to the tweezers. I know you're probably laughing by now because you already know what's going to happen. Here we go. Take my tweezers, and I got a bean. Put it into the stomach or the bowl. Dump out my bean. Got a piece of rice from last time. This is just one little tiny bean. So with my tweezers, I really wasn't able to pick up very much food. Now I wonder if I tried really hard, there we go. If I only pick up rice, I'm able to pick up 3 grains of rice. So that allows us to see that different bird beaks allow us to pick up, or allow birds to eat different amounts of food. Now we have one bird beak left, the toothpick. Let's see. I'm not getting anything. Spilling. Do you think a bird that has a beak like a toothpick is going to survive very well? The only thing I can pick up with my toothpick is the Mike and Ike, because I'm able to stick my beak, like a hummingbird, into the sugary substance to get out the nectar. Now scientists, this is difficult. Did you see how careful I had to be to stick the toothpick into the Mike and Ike? Birds that have beaks like this, you typically don't see very many of them because it's more difficult for them to survive, because it's more difficult for them to find food. So let's go back. Let's make a prediction. Which bird beak out of my tools, the toothpick, tweezers, spoon, or tongs, allowed our bird to get the most food? Yeah, it was the tongs, right? What was the second most? The spoon. Then the tweezer was the easiest to find food. Not very much food, but find food. And then finally the toothpick was the most difficult. Scientists, this demo just shows us, it models for us how different organisms or different animals are able to survive in the wild. It's not easy to find food. There's not food always just laying around in nature for our animals, for our birds, for our squirrels, for our groundhogs, you name it. But having specialized structures or adaptations allows animals to be able to survive better. Now, there's no way a large beak that represents the tongs are going to fit on a hummingbird. But hummingbirds are really, really little, so they don't require as much food as a seagull. So having a beak that they just stick into some sort of organism plant that allows them to get nectar from makes more sense. Now, scientists, there are some animals that have gone extinct. There was this animal called the Dodo Bird. It was a bird that had no wings. Think about that. And it wasn't able to survive very well in its environment. So scientists, next week, we're actually going to read a book together called The Beaks of Birds. And it's going to go through, it's got some really cool pictures in here, but like here's some hummingbirds, right? And it's going to go through and tell us how the beaks of birds, there's a larger one, are adaptations that allow different birds to survive. So scientists, we will continue this idea of adaptations, especially with birds, next week. I'll see you back next week. Have a good day.